TBRI.
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 TOVD.
TBRI.
TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention.
TBRI is an attachment-based,
Trauma-informed intervention
that is designed to meet the complex needs
of vulnerable children.
TBRI uses empowering principles
To address physical needs,
connecting principles for attachment needs,
and correcting principles to disarm fear-based behaviors.
While TBRI is based on years of attachment, sensory processing, and neuroscience research,
the heartbeat of TBRI is connection.
Hello and welcome to the TBRI podcast. You're listening to Season 12, Episode 2. On this show, we talk all about trust-based relational intervention, or TBRI. We talk about different elements of the model itself, and we also talk about how TBRI is applied in various communities of care and practice. I'm Emily Pickett, producer of the podcast, and today we're continuing our series about supporting young adults as they transition from high school to adulthood. Today we have a returning guest to the TBRI podcast. Brooks Kaskela is a TBRI practitioner and a TBRI mentor, and she lives and serves in Colorado. Brooks has been in the mental health field for 25 years and loves getting curious about all aspects of being human, relationships, and mental health. She currently enjoys going deeper with TBRI principles in a clinical role at Warren Village, serving single parents and their children that have had adverse experiences. Brooks has 2 sons with whom she has tried to implement TBRI as much as humanly possible. And on that note, today we are chatting with Brooks about launching young adults, something she has experience in both professionally and personally. If you're parenting or caring for a young adult or a college student who is nearing the next step of their independence, this episode is for you. Please enjoy this conversation with Brooks Kaskela.
Hello, Brooks. Welcome back.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
I know. So last time you were here, we chatted about camps, which if our friends listening haven't listened, they should go listen to that just to hear about our unique connection from our childhoods when then we reunited. That feels a little dramatic, but we reconnected as adults, and that's super fun. So since we chatted, you have a new job and are working in a new environment. Would you share kind of what you're doing now for us to understand?
I work at Warren Village here in Denver, Colorado, and it provides not just transitional housing, but also wraparound supports, complete with an early learning center for single parents and their children that have experienced housing instability. And it's pretty amazing bringing TBRI to that space. I feel like it's true prevention work and support, and it lights me up. I'm excited to be there.
That's so cool. Yeah, you look really delighted when you talk about it. So that's really fun, and what a great program. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Okay, I have to take a big deep breath because we're about to talk about what it's like to parent kids through the college years. And we're going to talk both, you and I both have kids that are in that space or recently in that space or about to be in that space. So we've done it. We've lived, somewhat survived it. And then also professionally, you and I both have a lot of experience in working with teens and families with teens and watching that. So we'll come at it from a lot of different ways and just have a really good conversation. So do you think, we talk about development, we have a episode with Molly and Casey where they talk about kind of the developmental years of late teens and early 20s that'll be coming out around this one. How do you see that shift in parenting change as we begin that process of launching? So like high school graduation has happened, and we know it happens long before that, right? Like we're scaffolding all through the teen years, but when we're getting really down to that nitty gritty, what do you think that process of sending them off looks like? Yeah.
Take my deep breath too, because this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I can't think of anything that I care more about or think more about. Yeah. But honestly, it makes me think about chat and cultural historical activity theory that TBRI teaches us. And the reason it makes me think about that is because my object shifted. And I think when I first started the launch process, I didn't know my object shifted, which is my goal. I kind of thought I could keep using the same roles, rules, and tools that I had always used and just keep them in line or whatever that is. And so then I've just found that my object has shifted. And to give some context, I have a 21-year-old that's a junior in college, and I have a 18-year-old that's a senior in high school. And so with my 21-year-old and parenting him, he's needed different things from me, and my parenting goal has needed to change. And so then I've had to change my roles, rules, and tools, which is entirely the way I operate. And I had to take a step back and really see what he needed from me at that step in the journey. And so I'm just holding on and riding my zoped, as we say in TBRI.
Yeah, and so a couple of notes. Leah Gillum and Scott Waters were on talking about implementation, and they talk a lot about cultural historical activity theory, or as we say, chat. So if you haven't listened to that one, that would be a great way to get more context about some of the things Brooks is talking about. But just the idea of like, it doesn't end when they turn 18, it doesn't end when they graduate high school, but it does take a major shift in needs and expectations around I just think what it all looks like. My needs, their needs. I think as parents, we're going through a grief process. I think as kids, they're like scared and pumped all at the same time. So it is a real tricky spot, I think.
And I think we have to hold space for it being a tricky spot for them too.
Mm-hmm.
I think they certainly sometimes don't show that. But you're making me think about my son has been in college for 3 years now. And in this third year, I'm actually seeing less of him on the weekends, which is completely developmentally appropriate. But I see him trying to navigate that piece too, where he almost feels like he should be home a little more than he is. And I'm having to validate of like, you're doing exactly what you need to be doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we walked through the same thing. So let's just chat for a minute about like before he launched, and I know you have one you're prepping now. Um, well, like, did you have priorities in what you wanted him to know how to do? Because there are some things I think as parents we joke about, like when my sweet one was asked me how to address an envelope, and I didn't realize we were so electronic by that point that isn't actually a skill that we had to use. But thinking through bigger things of, you know, going into college, what were some maybe interpersonal skills or regulatory skills you wanted him to be able to have?
I can tell you about one I got okay and one I totally missed until this year. And so what I wanted him to go to college with was really, I think about the 4 skills all the time of healthy relationships. And I really wanted him to be able to negotiate his own needs and to be autonomous out there in that wild world without me. So to speak. And so I really wanted those 4 skills to be in a healthy space for him. But I also wanted to remind him of our foundation of connection. And so I came to TBRI kind of in his like middle school years. And so that's where I really started increasing my foundation of connection. And I truly credit that with my relationship with my kids now, because if I'd used my old tools, I wouldn't have what I have now. And before he left, we were all in a challenging place because all of our objects are shifting and everything is, kind of transitioning. I made him a quilt out of his baby clothes. And it was healing for me too, to feel those little clothes that I felt on their little bodies. And I don't want to make myself emotional, but the other thing I did was I made a photo book because, yeah, as you said, in this digital age, all our photos are on our phones. And so I went through his entire childhood and put so many reps of that attachment cycle in a book and gave it to him before he left. And I plan to do that for my youngest. And he got all those years. But anyway, so I just wanted them to have those reminders of that connection is always here. And I would say where I missed is that I didn't know he didn't know how to cook real well. And so I didn't get him a recipe book until 3 years in, but then
Yeah.
I made him a recipe book and got him a, grocery store gift card. But I got the connection right, but I missed the piece around, oh yeah, he needs to know how to make spaghetti.
Right.
And so now he's doing a little better on nutrition because
Yeah.
his mom clued in a little bit. So
It's funny though, because I think if there's something you want to get right, like our kids are going to figure out how to eat. Like they're actually, they will figure that out, before something goes terribly awry. But to have the foundation of how to do healthy relationships and the four skills from Jude Cassidy's work of, just give care, receive care, be your autonomous self, and be able to negotiate your needs. If there's any place that them, they're going to have a huge opportunity to use those four skills outside of our coaching. And I think, man, that's the thing to get right. That's the thing to get right. And I love that you talked about the photo album with the attachment cycle basically over and over and over on display. And, I think whether they're our kids from birth or if they came to us later in their lives, we can recreate a lot of that and kind of show them through artifacts. Like, this is how our relationship has gone. And the answer is still, when you're in distress, you can come to me.
yeah.
And that's hard. I think I was thinking back about one of the things I wanted to do was to have that foundation of connection so that if my daughter was in distress when she went away, she would want to come back to me and not, some of the less healthy things that happen in college. And I also want her to have friends to go to and other support systems. She doesn't have to just come to me, but I want to be the safe place for her to come if she needs it.
Exactly. Bring me your mess, sweetheart. I got
Bring
you.
me your mess. And boy, yes, we'll get into that. um, let's chat just a little bit about that packing up, dropping off, all of that stuff. What was that? What was that like? Everybody's a hot mess, I feel like. And literally here in Texas, we're really hot and irritated by being so. I mean, I think it was easily over 100 degrees on our drop-off day. So, how'd you prep for that? Did you lay down expectations? Did you let him drive the train? What was that like?
I can feel it. I can feel it in my
Uh-huh.
chest when you
Uh-huh.
asked me that question, Sarah. I just wanted to reflect that. But I laid down a minimal expectations, and I really tried to keep in mind the balance of structure and nurture. And when I'm thinking about even when he went back for sophomore year and he'd come home over the summer because the dorms had closed, and I was like, okay, we got to pack up. You got school, and I to give him these transition warnings of we need to pack up your stuff. And I'm also trying to regulate myself because I like to be prepped. If I'm going to need an extra box, if I need somebody to help us drive, I want to know that ahead of time. And I don't feel like he has that need. And so he was packing up at 9 o'clock at night before he was leaving to go to school the next morning. And I had to take a step back and regulate myself and realize that just because he wasn't doing it the way that I would do it doesn't mean that he was doing it wrong.
Right.
And he got it done. He left on time. He brought all the things, so I can't fault that. I don't know, you're just making me think too of the first time I dropped him off. Shockingly, I cried my eyes out. And one of the things that he offered to me, which I thought was so kind, is there's an app where you can take a picture every day and it tells you where you are. And so for at least his first year or two of college, I really loved that app. And I called it my proof of life app. And it was so nice for him to do that with me. But I also think he enjoyed that after I launched him because I would take pictures of his cat or take pictures of whatever meal I was cooking. Like I tried to be intentional about taking pictures around home for him. So that was actually a decent piece of our launch.
What's that called?
It was the Be Real.
Be Real, that's it. I kept saying, anyway, you don't need to know what was happening in my brain.
But I will say my second launch with him, I didn't think about it. I messed up on my own self. And my first time I was prepped, I overthought it. all the things. We had the app. I knew I was going to cry. And then my second year that I launched him, I thought, oh, I've already done this before. I was busy. My work calendar was busy. So I was just kind of doing every day separate. And when I walked out of taking him to his dorm, I felt like I had been kicked in the gut. I just had never felt like that. I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh, I'm still emotional. It makes me emotional to think about it now.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
wild.
It is sneaky. That second year is sneaky. And then like at least for mine, like it went from she went from like dorm living to apartment living, so it required more stuff. So I felt like we almost like did the packing thing 2 years in a row and the expense of the packing thing 2 years in a row, which I didn't think that through as like, oh, she's gonna have to have like dishes because she won't have a meal plan anymore. Um, I also was remembering a time when I was in her room with her and it was just the two of us and we're like making the bed and this is her freshman year drop off and it's COVID. So like everything is crazy and I looked at her and I said, "You're ready for us to go, huh?" And she was like, "Yeah, I think so." And I was like devastated because I wasn't done. Like the pillows didn't have pillowcases on, which isn't like stuff within my personality that matters to me, but it felt like we hadn't completed the task. But her anxiety was, she like needed some time without any of us trying to speak into what was going to happen. And I remember just thinking like, you give it to her. Like the way you can connect is by hearing her voice, like hear her voice. And I remember just walking out and we said our goodbyes and I was just sobbing like a baby. I got in my car and I had to stay on campus for work. And anyway, it's hard. That's a really hard moment, especially when you hear a lot about goodbyes that don't go how the parents hoped they would. But I think people need to know that developmentally, that's completely normal for our kids to do that because they're trying to create some separation to make it easier.
I think too, you remind me of driving away from that first year. I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of grace. I think about this, about having the compassionate lens of TBRI for all of us and for ourselves. Because as I drove away from that first drop off, I was thinking in my head, well, is the bookshelf that we bought him going to fit in his dorm? And does he know how to access his meal plan? And I had to like stop that. And I had to say, that's not yours to own anymore. And that was really hard to kind of give him that space.
I remember Casey called talking to me, or not talking to me. Casey wasn't lecturing me, but Casey talking about the circle of security, which we often teach alongside TBRI, and the idea that the kid goes out and explores and they come home and we're their secure base, or they come back. I mean, it could be across the room when they're a toddler to, high school football. They look up in the stands. That's kind of that circle, like touch points, coming back around. And I just remember thinking like, oh, the circle just got a lot bigger. It just got a whole lot bigger. And my needs and her needs are going to be different, but I need to get my needs met outside of her. And how am I going to do that? And what are my safe relationships going to look like to be able to, allow for that separation with her that is developmentally appropriate and should happen and grieve it getting bigger.
I told somebody after I launched my oldest that I just signed up to be terrified forever. You're not finished at 18. Like when they're toddlers, you're terrified. When they're, I mean, you're just always terrified. But I think to your point, where I've found solace is not with my son necessarily, but it's with friends like you that I've had to co-regulate with people that are in similar experiences to just for me to feel seen. That's not his job for me to feel seen, but that might be your job, and my job might be for you to feel seen.
And yours.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like even when I think about, transitioning to now they're there and we're not, and that fear thing. I mean, one thing that's happened for me I've found to be really interesting is every time she came home, if she was going somewhere, I was like, hey, will you just let me know when you get there safely? And I was like, she's been gone for months. Like you haven't known where she was, but that shifted. And so we had to have a conversation about it of like, hey, I'm not listen, when you're away at school, I don't know your comings and goings, but for some reason, when you're home, I feel like if I don't hear from you, then something could have happened. And which is maybe me being a little anxious or something, but like there was something that would shift back and forth in the information I was hoping to have when she was home for breaks and stuff like that. And like trying not to be too much of an old lady, but um what about structure nurture, trying to balance it as while they're gone, all of that stuff. Did you guys have rules around anything, communication, money, grades? Did he need to work? Um,
Say that they're hard rules, like what I think about is with TBRI and having the foundation of connection, which is why I think, I do have the relationship and they do call me when I need me. But if I don't get to talk to him very much, I'm not going to be hammering in rules when I do get to talk to him. I don't have as much frequency of interaction with him as I had when he was home. So I think we still had structure, but I don't think we called it rules. And so, for instance, he would get a weekly stipend, shall we call it, because he's still got to exist and I want him focusing on school and all the things. And so that was a set amount. And if he needed something ahead of time, then we're going to take it out of that set amount. And so he could borrow against himself, so to speak. So we had that structure in place. I can remember when I was younger and having to call my parents on Sunday felt like a limitation. And so instead, we try to just make it happen more organically. And we're actually finding that he's really leaning into that, especially since he's been in his third year now. And so I think it's structure without it being named as I am holding the structure. Like it's almost like an inherent structure that we would have in any relationship almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we did a similar thing, and it kind of like I think our own. She naturally had some rules because of some scholarship dollars that she had to maintain certain grades, which I don't even know how to get into the portal to see her grades. Like that is I am not that parent. I don't maybe that's bad, but I'm like, you're in college, you're responsible for getting yourself to class, you're responsible for doing your work. Like if I need to help you, I'm happy to step in and help. But um, for me, that I didn't need to manage that, or that just didn't feel like something I needed to be involved in. But the money piece, we kind of did something similar as like, we'll pay for your rent and some like your living costs, but you need to get a job for your fun because college fun is quite expensive. And so it was kind of our little balance of like, you actually don't have to work, but if you want to buy that cute shirt when you're out with your friends, then you're probably going to have to work, and we of course provided clothes, but that was our balance. But yeah, we didn't have any rules either. We didn't do the GPS stuff. Maybe we did. Maybe I did have a couple of rules. We did not do the GPS. I don't know what that app is called where you can know where each
like
other are.
360 or whatnot.
Yeah. We did not do that, but we did have a proof of life friend. So if for some reason, that mom intuition, you wake up in the night and you're like, is she okay? And if she didn't reply to a text, then we had a friend who was her proof of life backup. Like that was kind of our.
That was a rule, actually.
Yes.
I would say that was I would say expectation more than rule is if I reach out to you, I need you to not ghost me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm paying for your
That's
phone.
interesting. Yeah, because you have the capacity to really induce a lot of fear in me. And so the respectful thing, because we're in relationship, is we did have the kids are the only ones that know if a text has been read on my phone. And it's the same on theirs. It's like, let's just agree that at least I know you've read it, like, and then you need to reply. Yeah. But that's also part of that. Just like, use respect, be kind and, yeah. Okay. Sometimes it makes me feel so much better to talk to you because I'm like, I just don't like, I like one of the things we teach all the time, right, is that if heavy connection is there, then you have fewer need for a bunch of rules because the connection sort of dictates the environment. But sometimes I'm like, man, was that too far away?
hard to navigate. I think when they're younger, it's easy to know that you need to potty train them.
Right.
They should probably learn how to do these things. Use a fork. That sounds like an appropriate expectation, but he's learned all these things. And so now I think it just really gets muddy because we have to honor their space. And even I'm thinking about that so much, even in doing this podcast with you, of just honoring this space and recognizing that he could look this up at any time and know exactly what I'm saying about his transition.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, we certainly want to be respectful of their experiences. And so know that when I ask, did you ever get any kind of distress call? Things weren't going well, crisis is happening, or even just the frustration. My roommate's bugging me, or my professor isn't listening, or any of those. And how did you respond? What does that look like as far as because you're right, like part of the developmental thing is that we've moved into a different kind of supportive person in their world.
Yeah. And yes, I have received those, and I won't go into detail because that's his story. But what I'll say is my experience in that, and I can feel it in my body when I tell you that I'm so grateful that he did call me and has called me and continues to call me. And when I get those calls, I have to regulate myself because I want to tell him all the things, right? But I have to give him that space to process with me and to just be that sounding board for him, because he's not asking me how to tie his shoes. He's asking me about changing his major. He's asking me about relationships. He's asking me about, traveling abroad or whatever the case may be. He's asking me about mistakes that are appropriate that he might have made. And so my job is to walk alongside him in that space and be that sounding board and let him know that I'm okay with his mess. And I think that's the biggest TBRI thought that just blares in my mind is don't just dive in and advice the heck out of it. That's not what he needs from you. He needs you to just be a sounding board and to gently guide as needed. And maybe say things like, well, did you consider this as an alternative? And did you consider this? Because in those times, those are precious moments. And that's why that fills me with gratitude. And it reminds me of what TBRI teaches us about they still have that need for co-regulation. And they have that need until they're 30. If we've met all their needs, appropriately and healthily all the way up to that. And so he still needs me to help him co-regulate. And if I've signed up to be terrified, to some degree, he has too around some of these pieces. And so I just wanted to know that no matter what, he's not alone and that he can bring his mess and we've got this together. And that's where some of that TBRI lens really comes into play and helps me regulate and not go down the advice rabbit hole, because he's not going to call me back if I just tell him what to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things when I get the call is like, okay, so what next? So what's the next right step in this circumstance? What do you think? Like, what are some options? And, we just try to problem solve together. And, I'll never forget one time, and I've probably told this story before, but one time I got the big distress call, the can you show up call. And I was like reflecting back as I was driving to her school to say of like early in my TBRI journey, somebody said, like, if we send them away when they're little, they will not come to us when they're in distress, when they're older. And that was a technique that I used before I knew TBRI. Like, we did the timeout thing. We did go to your room before I learned, like, bringing them to you in distress. And I remember as I was driving up there and I was just sobbing in the car. I was so worried about, like, right, like when the kid actually says, like, no, I need you to actually be here, not just be on the phone, like, come to me. And I thought, thank God that I learned to not send her away, because she wouldn't be asking me to show up here right now. And it was when we talk about the journey of TBRI, it was this really remarkable moment in my personal journey. I think it was a huge moment in our relationship where it's like you said, like sometimes you feel like it just kind of works, like you just kind of get it. But she was in so much distress. And I remember just sitting with her, and because of the personal work, because of the attachment work, all of a sudden I was able to sit with her, and she was not okay, and I was not okay with her not being okay, but I was still a good mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I was still able to say, like, I can show up and just be with you as a 22-year-old who has all of these things going on, but you're still coming back around in this attachment cycle because you have a need that's different than tying your shoes and changing your diaper and buying your clothes, right? And and I think those early years matter and how the later years play out. And I don't think I realized that in that full depth. I've said it in training before, like if we send them away when they're young, they're not going to come to us. But it's true. It's true when we see that play out in these moments of distress.
There's so many things I'm grateful for with TBRI, with my relationship with my boys, and that attachment cycle awareness. That's huge, Sarah, is to be able to see the need behind the behavior and to recognize when something is that crying baby. They're just not the crying baby anymore because they are also dealing with attention as well and their own role shifting. And so when I can recognize the attachment cycle, even in the unpleasant situations, then I can have that compassion and hold that space for him.
Right. Right. And you can still see, like, if you're really mindful, right, you can see the need behind all of that going on, which is just show up. It's like you said, like, I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm just talking to him about what's going on.
I had this, you reminded me with my younger one that's 18. We had a conversation about TBRI versus old school tools. And it was so interesting because he was reflecting to me that some of those old school tools are all about pushing somebody away, grounding, timeouts, which I did, right? Pre-TBRI. And it was just so interesting to me that he saw that correlation, and it wasn't rocket science for him. He's like, oh yeah, that's not going to make me want to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, glad you got that a lot faster than I did.
Lucky you. Thank you, sir. So how do you guys now, you're 3 years in, and I know you're getting ready to launch. Is there anything you'll do differently with your younger? I mean, I know, like, right, different kids, different humans, different relationship, all of those things. But maybe did you teach him to cook?
Does know how to cook. So I was just thinking that he's set on that one. He's going further away. So he's going about 5 hours away. And so I've gotten a credit card for the only airline that'll fly into that space so that I can start racking up my points for when he needs them or when I need them for him. I don't know. That's a hard question because I'm in the thick of it right now. But I think I have to attune to his own needs. And I can't do the same thing that I did with Jack, but I will still lean into the relationship. And I will still, I don't even know if he's expecting it because I did, 2 volumes of their childhood with the photo album for Jack. So I'm going to make sure that I follow through and do a photo album for his last 3 years that he's been at home because throughout this shift with my oldest, we haven't really talked about how mindful I've had to be about how that impacted my youngest because he lost his buddy, his day-to-day buddy, and watching that relationship is a whole different piece of it. But I need him to know that the last 3 years matter, even if our family has looked different. And so I feel myself really leaning into that.
Wow. You're about to do it again.
I don't even know. Day by day.
Day by day. Magic
mustache. Talk to friends.
Well, and I hate to tell you, but you have another transition coming next year too, because when they graduate, that's a whole nother thing that happens. They graduate college. You're like, oh, now what does this look like? It just is, it's fascinating, but I will say this, like, doing the work, being on the journey has made the adult-child relationship for me almost confusing because I didn't want anything to do with my parents. I didn't want to be near them or call them or any of that. And one of the things that my oldest said recently is she was like, Mom, I just want to hang out with you. And I was literally like, wait, what? Like that, that doesn't, like, it doesn't commute in my mind for her age range. And so I think just if you're parenting littles, the day is going to come when all of that effort to, be mindful of the attachment cycle and meeting needs and those 4 skills and all the things you feel like were, spouting at you the whole time. There's going to be a time when your 20 some odd year old is going to look at you and say, I just want to be with you. And that's not normal. That, to me, that is not my experience. And so I think to know that's an opportunity is really, really cool.
With you, and I've had glimmers of that, and it is precious, and it is not what my experience was. And you're making me think too that sometimes we can't fully see them, their experience. They have an internal world that they're pulling away from, and they're navigating on their own. And so as you're talking about parenting of littles, one thing that really gave me some comfort is that when I couldn't really see their internal world as much as I could have previously in their life, I knew the ingredients I put in there. And so I tried to be hopeful that it's like, that's still in there, Brooks. It's still there. You baked it in. You just can't see it right now, but hopefully they're using it and it's part of their secret sauce. So,
jeez, that is so good. Yeah, it's in there. It is absolutely in there. And the things that we put in that we would prefer not to, we can also actually work through that. Like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, All right, rapid fire. Easiest part of parenting young adults, hardest part of parenting young adults.
I don't have to worry about how clean his room is or what time he goes to bed. So that's the easiest part. I reply to the reels and, the humor and that connection, I can lean into that. So I think when I get that connection space, I lean in. So that's fun. The hardest part is I don't have control. Simply put, I can't. I feel that one too, as I say it. I can't keep him safe. And, I had throughout my kids' whole life, my mantra, we call it a life value term, was my most important job is to keep you safe. And I said that when they were 3, and I said that when they were 17. And I had a conversation with him last summer where I was like, that's not my most important job anymore. That's your most important job. And I can feel it as I tell you that, because I didn't pass the baton. I'm still here, but it's his. It's not mine.
Yeah. Well, Brooks, thank you so much for being here today. What a pleasure. I just love chatting with you. Thanks for being here.
I've been really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Yeah.
The TBRI podcast is produced by the Care and Purpose Institute of Child Development at TCU. To learn more about TBRI and the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit child.tcu.edu/podcast.